Just run through what we do on our farms in Alberta and Saskatchewan, and give you a little bit of history about New Zealand and where I kind of started from. So the two properties that we've got, one in Hardisty, Alberta, which is 2 hours east of Edmonton. We've got this is our year-round property, so we've got mixed cattle and cropping. We're doing some organic cropping there as well. We've just started on that over the last few years, and as we get a system developed, we want to look to expand on that system. We've got our breeding cows, so we run 1,600 breeding cows. That includes about 400 heifers that we calve every year, and we winter all our calves. So we've got about 3,500 head total, and we're doing some grass finishing there of about 400 to 500 head, whatever we can, whatever we've got the market for. And the rest get natural finish, so they'll go into a feedlot. But our plan is to build our grass finish system and hopefully put all our cattle through that system. And then in southeast Saskatchewan, about an hour from the Manitoba border, just above the Trans-Canada Highway, we've got 16,000 acres there. We run up to 8,000 yearlings there for an extended part of the season. And then they go back and get finished in feedlots. So, we would look to incorporate more of a grass finishing program there if we could, but at the moment we're basically just custom feeding most of those cattle. And then we've just started an organic system there as well. So we've broken up some land, 3,000 acres, and we're going to incorporate that into our rotation. So a big part of what we do is try and incorporate our cattle and our cropping side and get the benefits out of both, get them working together. So I'll go a little bit more in depth into that, and then we do some forage and some cover cropping there as well to feed those cattle in the autumn. So I'll just run through a little bit sort of what we are and what we do. So our aims and objectives. So we want to run a fully integrated cattle and cropping system. Be economically and environmentally sustainable, reduce our carbon footprint, to be progressive in the agriculture industry, and keep an open mind and try new things and work closely with like-minded people in the industry. Build resilience, so that's really important for us. So we want to be able to withstand the ups and downs of different markets and also different seasons as well, and be able to be in a good position where we can make the most of whatever is being thrown at us. And probably the most important, probably should be at the top, is the regenerative side. So we've got to keep getting better and better with what we're doing, and that's our focus as we build really putting a lot of focus on the soils and building the soils up and getting production as well, above ground but also below ground. So we want to move with the times as well and make the most of new technology as it becomes available, and we can see a fit for it in our operation to help us go to the next level. So a big part for me was to build a 365-day grazing system. So coming from New Zealand, we can grow grass where I'm from in New Zealand pretty much 12 months of the year. It slows down in the winter time, but we can remain green if we have a mild winter. So coming to Canada, specifically Western Canada in Alberta, that was a bit of a shock to the system. So when I get there and I find out the average grazing days is about 120 days for a yearling, that wasn't very much. I sort of wasn't quite sure what I was going to do with the rest of my time. So I could see some opportunities though to extend that grazing season through various different systems, which I'll go through into further a little bit later on here. And try and extend it at least, and then the next step was can we develop a system that's going to take us right through those winters. So we've been progressing pretty good over the last number of years and being able to do that. So and we want to have fun doing it too. We've got a good team culture on our farm, and everyone has a bit of fun at the same time. So that's pretty important for us. So in order to achieve those, I guess we need diversity and flexibility. So we've got our breeding side, we've got our backgrounding side, some custom grazing, we've got our grass and forage finishing, our cropping, and we want to fully integrate those systems to be able to be able to maximise and capitalise on that. So I'll just go back to the start where I come from. So farming in New Zealand. So I'm not sure how many people here have been to New Zealand. Hands up. Yeah, so there's a few here, I guess, which is good. So you may be familiar with some of these photos that I'm going to go through. We've got lots of hill country there, lots of ups and downs, but a lot of that land is still intensively farmed. It's rotationally grazed. Small paddocks, even on the side of the hill. I guess they say you get both sides of the acre that way, so we'll see about that. There's just a few sheep there. Not too many sheep here. I was just talking to a farmer before that had some. He was a sheep farmer. But so that was one thing that was pretty different for me coming here, not having the sheep and being involved in just as many cattle as I was sheep. But the principles of what we're doing here and our grazing management are still the same. No matter what the livestock, there's definite advantages of having a mixed herd. So typically in New Zealand, you'll have an 80-20 ratio in the high country. So you have 80% sheep and 20% cattle, and the cattle are used more as a management tool to keep those pastures in good shape. Basically for the sheep. The sheep are the most productive, I guess, in that situation. So a pretty common place to have it combined. And then, as I mentioned before, lots of hill country. So there's a lot of country that looks like that on the left, pretty steep, but still very productive. Very productive when it's managed in a rotational grazing system. And we do get 4 seasons there too, 4 quite distinct seasons. I think there's parts of it that are probably similar here. Our winters aren't quite as harsh as you guys are, but the further south in New Zealand that you go, they do have a definite cold winter and the growing season stops there. So we can have drought even with the rainfall that we get. We're still prone to some dry conditions, and there has been that over the last couple of years. So you need to be equipped, I guess. But most of the farms there don't have a lot of stored feed. A lot of it, they just rely on their management and making early decisions and the stock classes that they carry, so that they can de-stock their farm, if the dry comes. So that's kind of how it's managed. It's pretty hard to put up feed on the side of a hill like that. So our New Zealand, the grass dairy systems are a huge part of the New Zealand industry now. So forage-based systems. So that was different for me coming over here too. I used to see dairy cows out grazing and doing all that, and then it's pretty hard to find them in their sheds here unless you go inside. We've learned a lot in the grazing side. The dairy farmers, I guess, have probably been at the forefront of the, a lot of the new species and new technology available in the grazing side. They monitor their cattle a lot. They're coming through the shed every day, so they know when their production's going up or down, or if they're doing the right thing or the wrong thing. So they've got a pretty good handle on grazing management and the best practices, I guess, in order to get the production. So 40% of world dairy exports come from New Zealand, and most of that is in the form of dry milk powder. But that sounds like a lot, but in the whole scheme of things, there's only 2% of global production. So New Zealand can get squashed pretty quickly, which has actually happened over the last couple of years with the dairy prices. I think the dairy farmers here are being reasonably secure with the way things are set up here, so that's good for them. Not so good for a country like New Zealand, but that's kind of the way it goes. So these are some dairy cows that are grazing that's actually kale. So in our milking season, we pretty much dry a majority of the cows off over the winter time in New Zealand. There's a 2-3 month period where they don't actually milk, and they dry them off, and most of the time they'll put them onto an annual crop like this to get them through the winter time, and then they'll start them back up in the spring and start calving and milking again. So that's one way that they'll get them through. They can grow good quality feed and get them through that winter time on a fairly condensed area. just a few more photos there. That's sort of the clean-up, a few stalks, and that's about all that's left behind. So lots of subdivision, lots of laneways typically leading back to the milking shed. So the cows have got to walk a reasonable distance to from the end of the farm to get back to the shed. But yeah, rotational grazing, and I've got it fine-tuned pretty good. So that's sort of enough of the New Zealand side, and I'll just go on to sort of what we're doing and what I've been able to take from New Zealand, what I've learnt there, and being able to implement it in Alberta and Saskatchewan anyway. So water being one of the most important things. So these are just some trough systems that we've got set up, a typical summer system on the left-hand side there, and then a wintering system on the right. So our water lines out there, we've got to put them 8 feet down in the ground, 8 to 10, and then have them rising up to the trough. I think it doesn't have to be quite as deep here, which is probably lucky. But yeah, that can be a bit of a mission, I guess, to get those in. Our summer lines we just run shallow, so about a foot in the ground, run them shallow, and then we blow them out before the winter time, push all the water out, and then we can fire them up in the spring. So I'll go through our seasonal grazing systems, what we use, and also if you've got any questions, I guess while I'm talking, just put your hands up and I can answer anything as we go. And yeah, if not, we can do a few at the end. So yeah.
Right to the front, somebody else.
Oh, yep. Move to Alberta?
Yeah, from New Zealand where you can graze all here.
Yeah, just a new challenge, I guess. New opportunity. Days like today, I ask myself why too.
You also married a Canadian too.
Yeah, I'm married a Canadian now. Yeah. So yeah, that kind of helps. Yeah, but good question, good point. So I'll start in the spring and summer. So that's sort of what I'd started with, I guess, when I landed here. So I kind of had to adapt pretty quick to the growing conditions and the season. Didn't know a whole lot about it. So maximising the growing season. So we've got a short season, especially in Alberta. I think you guys are a little bit more extended here, which is nice. But we've got a short season out there. What I found really interesting when I did come here and worked out some of the growth rates of the pastures and things was that we could actually grow the same amount of dry matter in Alberta as we could in dry land parts in New Zealand. We just grew it in 3 or 4 months as opposed to spread out over 12 months. And so that makes it actually really challenging from a grazing point of view to manage that feed and get the best out of it, maintain the quality in order to get the most effectiveness out of it. So a little bit of data there. So we use our perennial and annual pastures to get us through this time of year. We're using some softleaf tall fescues and some newer varieties of grasses that are coming in. Alfalfa is pretty predominant in our mixes as well. We use sandfoin, vetches, and clovers, ryegrass, and also some herbs, some plantain and chicory. So we just over the last few years been getting more and more into some of the newer grasses and newer varieties. So for me, I guess in our system, alfalfa is kind of the king. We can't grow a lot of it in New Zealand. Dryland parts of New Zealand can, and they do grow it well. But when I came over here and I'd see it growing in the ditches and it was kind of growing all over the place, I thought, man, this is pretty awesome. And it's winter dormancy and it just fits our growth time really good. And we're typically dry where we are in Alberta, so it just helps with that too. So we're getting fast animal growth rates on it. So over 2 pounds a day on our yearling cattle. We're actually on our finishing cattle, which are a year older. We're getting over 3 pounds. So with that, we're getting the natural end fixation, better water conversion to energy. We're growing twice the dry matter of traditional grass species, so that's really important. We're running a higher carrying capacity and getting deep soil water storage utilisation and reliability. Also the ability to extract nutrients from deeper in the soil, better animal fertility and overall production, and early rumen development in our young stock. So we carve on grass just as the grass sort of is starting to grow. Carve on grass, and you know, those cattle, you know, the young calves, you know, they get you know, start grazing when that feed's available, and they'll start grazing a lot earlier in life if it's there for them to eat. So that's why we carve them, and it kind of fits our forage feed system as well, getting those young stock into that system that we want them to continue. And getting the extra feed growing out of it too is really important. So, you know, we've got pastures, I guess, on our place that are, you know, 10 years old, and we're noticing, you know, they're starting to decrease in production. And so the comparison between, you know, a pasture that's 10 years old and the ones that are 2 or 3 years old, we're running about a 30% higher carrying capacity on those pastures. So that's really significant. So, you know, that's why I'll get into our rotation a little bit further on, but that's why we're speeding up our rotation of our perennials and incorporating cropping in there as well, and getting that extra production. So one of the next questions, I guess, is, you know, I start talking about the alfalfa, and guys start talking about bloat and how do we manage the bloat. So, you know, we've got a few rules, I guess, that we stick to pretty stringently. So moving in the afternoon once the dew's gone, never move hungry on fresh feed, and we work on a 4 to 6 day grazing period on that alfalfa between moves, and that way we can monitor the feed, and if we need to move them a half a day earlier, then we can. You know, on a grass, predominantly grass-based pasture with more than 50% grass, we treat it then like a grass. So we're a lot more intensive. You know, we're down to 1 or 2 day shifts between areas. But the alfalfa, we've stretched it out. We're not impacting the plant by doing that. The regrowth isn't being affected, so we can stretch it out, and that gives us time to be able to look at that pasture and manage it. You know, moving cattle earlier if we have to, or if the weather conditions are changing. We'll also add fibre to that as well, so up to 20% of their daily intake can be fibre without reducing any weight gain, and that can actually help increase weight gain when we're on really lush feed, you know, high protein feed. So that's one thing we'll do. It also helps slow down the rumen and maintain rumen function and rumen pH. And I'm not sure what straw. Yep.
What do you need with the fibre there? How are you going to eat it?
Straw and old hay we'll put out as well. So we'll just spot bales out, or we'll use a shredder.
Before you move?
Yep. Before we move into a piece, we'll make sure that there's straw available. Yeah. So we can't necessarily force each one to go and eat it, but as long as it's available, they'll pretty much mix their own ration. Yeah. What we used to do when we first started grazing the alfalfa, we'd have pretty strict areas that we'd have fenced off, that were just alfalfa, and any native areas or, you know, tree areas we had fenced off as well, separately. Now we're actually incorporating both of those areas so that they've got a bit of roughage in there as well, and we're finding the cattle will go and select when they need to. Yeah, it's no perfect science. And another thing we'll do here, I think it's the next photo that we've got, is actually mow some strips in the field ahead of them, and you can do that sort of a week or more ahead of them, and just have that wilt down, and that just helps slow down the rumen as well. Gives them a bit of roughage and helps slow things down. So that's another system. We'll also put we haven't for the last few years, but we're set up to put bloat surfactant in the water systems as well. So if we're having trouble, or we suspect we're going to have trouble, then we can turn on those injectors and put that surfactant through. There's other ways as well. There's Rumensin bloat capsules that guys are using, and I think they're quite effective as well. And a really important thing when you're on high legumes is to make sure that there's lots of salt available for the cattle, and a B12 injection and other vaccines, clostridial vaccines are important to make sure that they're up to date too. So we manage really intensively. I guess we're always watching the cattle and making sure that things are going as planned. So also, then you can have mixed stands. So we run a slightly higher alfalfa content than probably, would be necessarily be recommended if you weren't going to be as intensive on watching it. But sandfoin is a good legume. 15% sandfoin in the diet is enough to significantly reduce the bloat risk. Sisa milk vetch is another one, and that's got good autumn dominance. I know out in our area it certainly does. I'm not sure about that here, but we're getting good production in the autumn. And then also having some grasses in the mix, and chicory and plantain is what we're using. So mixing that stand up definitely helps as well. So that's our perennial grazing side, and then I'll move on to some of our early season annual grazing. So this crop here is a triticale crop that was seeded in 2015 in the autumn, and then we grazed it last year in the spring. So there's other crops as well: winter wheat, full rye, winter triticale. So what we're trying to do with these winter crops too is as well as the production that we're aiming for early in the season, we're really looking to have something growing in the ground all the time. So we've always got a living root system in the ground, and so that's another part of why we want to incorporate more of these into our system. So one crop that we've seeded in this last autumn and we'll be grazing it this coming season is a sweet clover, hairy vetch, Italian ryegrass, and a winter triticale, just to add some more diversity to the blend, and hopefully some more production. So just some numbers on what we got there. So our production off that winter triticale, so first half of the season, so this is the first 75 days of the year. So we had 280 acres, 590 steers on there, and 75 grazing days. So average daily gain of just over 2 pounds a day. Total gain a head of 160, and pound gain per acre of 337. So that was the first half of the year, and then the second half of the season we went into that stubble and we direct seeded in there a cocktail grazing mix with some forage rape, some turnip, some ryegrass, some oats and some millet, to get some extra autumn production. So I'll go into that. So we're estimating another 150 to 200 pounds of gain on that cocktail crop. Yep.
And you've got 75 grazing days. You don't mean 75 calendar days with that, do you?
Yep, 75 calendar days
75, okay.
for those 590 steers.
Okay.
Yep. So our biggest calculation, I guess, when we're working at our production, we always relate it back to pounds of gain per acre. So that's really the number that we take from that is the pounds of gain per acre. Yeah. So, we had a really good season out there. This is how prolific, I guess, it was growing. So there's the 20-day difference in photos there. So the photo on the left is ultimately what we want to be grazing, that leafy vegetative plant, and that way we're getting that good regrowth too. It's not going back into reproductive mode. If we let it get to where it gets to on the right, then we're losing a lot of production. Cattle are still going to gain, but the overall production and utilisation out of that crop is going to be diminishing. So of that total area, we actually couldn't get around it fast enough to get back to the start in time to match the quality. So we had one area there, it was a 10-acre piece that we grazed once, and then we let it run to seed. And then we had another area there that we grazed twice, and we let that run to seed as well. We combined both of them at the end of the season. And I've got some numbers on that here. So the column on the left, the no graze, we got 90 bushels an acre. And then with one grazing, our bushels dropped, but then our pound of gain went up to just about 100 pounds an acre. And then two grazings, we were down again. And then we were up again another 100 pounds. So overall, with net production, I guess if we go across to we've got the expenses in there. There was set expenses that it cost for seeding and everything on all of them, and then there was an expense difference on the ones that we grazed. The expenses high because we had some fencing and other things in there. But what was interesting about this, using those numbers, so we had $5 a bushel for the triticale and $1 a pound for the beef. We actually netted a higher return on the areas that we grazed and combined. So, getting some good integration, I guess that was working. To be fair, we didn't anticipate that we were going to shut those areas up and let them run to seed. So they actually, when we grazed them, our timing wasn't optimum for necessarily regrowth or seed production. So I think we hurt the plants at those times. We still got that production, which we're happy with, but I think if we actually anticipated that, that was what we were going to do, we would have changed our grazing management slightly, made sure that we were grazing them at the optimum time when they were vegetative and getting some tillering and some extra regrowth. So that was good to see for us anyway, and that gives us some flexibility too on that crop. We had more than we could graze, so okay, well let's get in and we'll combine some of that too. So we're not stuck in any one system.